This toilet is not used very much. I've got 3 bathrooms actually, and this is the one that the cat drinks out of usually, and so it really hasn't been used as a toilet in probably, gosh, 5 or 6 years at least. And I go to flush it one day, and I get one of these numbers. And looking inside the tank there, come to find out that the flapper fell off, this little plunger right here, and it no longer will stick down into the valve assembly right there. The little piece of plastic that retains it in there has broken off. So rather than just get a new flapper and everything, I'm going to go ahead and there we get some extra light. I'm going to go ahead and replace the entire assembly, including this float assembly, a little chain that actuates the whole mechanism, as well as the input pipe down there. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to try to retain this nice hard line here instead of going with the flexible lines. I've already got the coupling loosened up under there, that little coupling right here. And in order to drain the tank, I basically just flushed it a couple times and then used a shop vac to get out the remaining water. What I want to do is take the entire tank off, which is going to require taking off that screw right there, and that screw, and that screw, and the associated rubber bushings there to get the tank off, and that way I can get it out of here and work with it a lot more effectively, because right above the toilet is this big shelf or a cabinet right here, and there's just not a whole lot of room in here to work actually. Very constrained. So what I'm going to do, this is one of the older toilets. This house was built in 1985, and this is one of the 5-gallon toilets. It's not the energy efficient toilet or anything like that, so it can definitely handle some of the larger loads that you might have on particular occasions. Much more efficient than, or actually much better than some of the newer toilets, I think. And what I'm going to do is try to replace the entire mechanism with the FluidMaster all-in-one toilet repair kit. And right away I can see it doesn't have quite the amount of materials that we need. I see just 2 screws or nuts and bolts there instead of 3, so I have to reuse one of the original fasteners. But this one's kind of unique in that it has a different float mechanism in here. So I'm going to see how that works. And comes of course with a complete set of instructions and how to do everything. It's pretty self-explanatory. First thing I've got to do is finish loosening up that coupling, and then I'll loosen up those 3 bolts I talked about in there and see if I can lift that tank off, take it outside in the yard, and see if I can clean all that crud out of there finally. I'm on a well and septic, and my water is a little bit hard, so it does get some sediment in here and calcium and lime deposits, which make it look a lot worse. I'm going to see if I can get most of that stuff out of there. Once I get the tank off, then I can go ahead and carry on with the rebuild process. Okay, now that we have the toilet tank on the ass end of this wrecked Crown Victoria, you can get a much better shot of how this thing works, hopefully. And it's very simple. You just have a bunch of water in here, I think about 5 gallons, stored. Comes in through this inlet tube right here under pressure. And when you go to flush the toilet, you raise this handle up. That raises this flapper valve up and just lets 5 gallons of water gravity feed down into the toilet bowl to flush it. And then this float comes down like that when that happens, and as the float comes down, it opens up this valve in here, which lets the pressurized water come in here and fill up the tank. And as the tank fills up, the float goes like that until it shuts off the water. Kind of like a carburetor float, actually. I'm not sure how old this is. It might be from 1985. And then I should point out that a source of leaks on many toilets is actually where these 3 fasteners are to secure the tank to the toilet bowl. I'm going to replace those if I can. That's what they look like on the bottom. You've got these gaskets around them. There's your water inlet. Then I gotta take this thing off and get this large nut off of here, which might be easier said than done. I don't have a wrench quite that big. That's the largest crescent wrench that I have. I don't have a pipe wrench actually. So let me go ahead and start seeing if I can get the hardest thing off first, which might be this, and then everything else should be fairly straightforward, just a straightforward swap. Well, I got most of the guts out of that tank here. I've got the main valve and float mechanism out, and that just came out with one bolt right here. Just used a crescent wrench to get that off. That wasn't too tight. And then I've got the inlet to the toilet bowl and flapper assembly that came out. I initially thought I'd need a pretty big pipe wrench to get on that, but this wasn't in there all that tight, so I was able to just work my hand in there and loosen this up from this direction, and then just grab the end of this and unscrew it. This big nut on here seems to be integrated in with the rubber seal, which gave me a pretty big surface to grip onto. So that means I can go ahead and continue with the job because I don't have a pipe wrench or a crescent wrench large enough to do the job. And the next challenge is, because this tank is so old and I have hard water, is to get the lever mechanism off of here. Now I've already got the bolt loosened up to take it off, but as you can see, this lever is attached to here, and the set screw basically is completely rusted and flush with the surface. I tried getting some vice grips on there to loosen it up, but I just ended up shearing it off. So we're going to just have to take this drill and basically just drill it out till it's sufficiently weakened enough, and then I can come on out with that lever, and I can finally get on this with a hose and clean all that nasty crud out of there. Okay, now I've got the tank all cleaned out as best I can. Looks a lot better. There's just a little bit of crud in there from hard water, but nothing too bad. And over here you can see a date code of April 26th, 1984. So this is the original toilet that came with the house, which is kind of neat. And over here I've got all the components prepared for installation. And what we have here is the flapper valve assembly or overfill pipe, and then we have the float assembly here. And the instructions say that the relationship between the critical level mark here, which I don't know if you can see that on this one, you can see the CL marking right there is pointing to that line. So this is your critical level mark right there. That line is supposed to be 1 inch higher than this pipe. So it's supposed to be, you know, something around in there. And what you have to do is you have to cut the pipe off, of course. You can use a just a regular hacksaw, is what I used. And what you do is you basically put this valve inside the tank here, do a dry fit, and make a measurement like I did right here with a pencil and start cutting. And at a minimum, this pipe has to be 1 inch below the opening for the flush handle. So that's basically going to make your reference point to start with. This mark here is 1 inch below, and that's the first cut. Then you leave this in there. Then you go ahead and install the float assembly, and you double check to make sure that this relationship here is 1 inch. This is 1 inch higher than this pipe here. And in my case it's not, and in your case it probably won't be either. And what you can do is you can grab the base of this valve assembly like this with one hand, and you can turn the inlet nipple with the other hand counterclockwise to bring it out or clockwise to move it in. And what that's going to do is it's going to adjust the height of this entire valve assembly. And in my case, it's already, the height of this valve assembly is almost level with the edge of the tank. So I went ahead and took this back out and just cut about another 3/4 of an inch off of this and fit everything together, tweak the adjustment on this, and now I've got my 1-inch relationship there. So I know that's going to be good. I still have to set the water level inside the tank, but that's going to be done with this adjusting screw right here once I get the water supply turned on and I see what's going on inside. I also went ahead and installed the new seal or rubber washer on the end of this. That's all ready to go. And I now have a pipe wrench because this project went on for 2 days at least because I started late yesterday. So now I have a pipe wrench that's substantial enough to tighten down this nut securely, which doesn't have to be very tight. I would like to get on there with a wrench and go just a hair past hand tight. So basically it's going to be very simple. I'm going to go ahead and install the flapper assembly inside like this, and I'm going to orient it in such a way that I don't completely cover up that screw hole so I can get in there later and tighten the screws. I'll angle it like that. And I'll angle it like that because instead of like this, because it minimizes the distance between the flapper assembly and the float assembly for the refill hose connection. Just makes it a little bit neater, minimizes the length for the chain. An interesting feature of this FluidMaster rebuild kit is that you can actually adjust how long this flapper stays open by turning this to where it says 9 for max. When you line that up with the hook for the chain, it'll stay open for the maximum amount of time, and then turning it counterclockwise back to 1 where it says minimum will make the flapper stay open for the least amount of time. And I can definitely think of some situations, Thanksgiving in particular, where you might want to have this flapper open for the maximum amount of time for maximum evacuation of the material. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get these things installed. This valve assembly just very simply just goes in here like that. And I'll orient it where this nipple here for the overflow tube is pointing in that direction, basically at the 3 o'clock position. And then that's tightened up basically with this wing nut. And it's a wing nut because they want you to tighten this just hand tight. Doesn't have to be extremely tight. All you want to do is just compress that gasket just enough to form a seal. Nothing in here is under an extreme amount of pressure or anything. It just has to be tight enough to avoid leaks. The kit came with 2 new tank to bowl screws instead of 3, but it does have extra gaskets just in case you do have a 3-bolt system like I do. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse one of these older screws. I've already got the new gaskets on here, and once I get these screws put in, I'll put the gaskets on the bottom side, and then we'll go ahead and be ready to put the tank in. These old gaskets here are just extremely hard. So just time to completely rebuild the entire toilet basically to bring this thing back to life and have it functioning normally. And then last but not least, you've got this flush handle, which is kind of on the cheap side. It's plastichrome is what I like to call it. And that's just going to thread in here after I get all the guts put in there. Thread in like that. And then you'll snake this nut around here, and you'll actually end up turning this counterclockwise to tighten instead of clockwise. That's a little gotcha with this kit. It actually kind of like some of the pulleys on alternators or engine components. Some of the belt driven accessories have a left hand thread. So that's so when this thing gets flushed all the time, it's going to act to keep tightening this instead of loosening it. I've seen a lot of toilets where the handle's kind of sitting like that. You just got to go in there and tighten that thing back up and it'll be good and tight. Or in the worst case, buy a new handle. They're not that expensive. Sometimes these things get cracked. Anyway, I'm going to take that back out of here, put these components in there, and we'll go over some of the other adjustments and finish this thing up. Okay, everything is all assembled, or most of it anyway. I've got the overflow pipe put in just like I wanted and oriented in such a way that I can get these screws down in there and take the tank off in the future. And I've got the clip installed with the overflow hose in here. The clip, according to the directions, has to go on the right hand side of the overflow pipe. And then you just want a slight bend in the overflow hose. And just make sure that they're on these nipples really tight, just all the way down. It's not too hard. And I've got the float assembly installed and everything. That's pretty straightforward. What's going to happen is as the water level rises in here, it's going to raise this float up more and more and more like that. And this valve right there is going to cut the water off. And it's just a lot of these adjustments are basically trial and error. I've had to take these things out of here about 3 or 4 times just to make sure that I get that critical level mark 1 inch higher than the fill tube, and then the fill tube at least 1 inch lower than the opening for the handle. So couple of different things going on there for adjustments, but not too bad. It's worth the effort to spend the time to get the adjustments just right to have a nice proper flush. And then I got the chain put on there, and I just left the extra slack in the chain. The instructions say it'll hold the lever all the way up and then pull the flapper as high as it'll go and then attach the chain, but I didn't find that method terribly useful. I just basically got the lever where I wanted it and just made sure the flapper goes all the way up. So now when I actuate the lever here, that flapper is at the maximum point of travel, so I got all that water going down there all at once instead of something like this or like that. And I got the setting on maximum now. So this thing is ready to go back onto the toilet bowl. I just need to thread these screws in here like that, and then install the washers on the opposite side. And then one last thing I got to do before I do any of that is to put this new tank to bowl gasket on there. It's really thick and spongy, which is nice. It's going to form a really good seal. This again you want to have just hand tight for your water inlet. This is where all the water comes out to flush the toilet itself. And I got this nut just a smidge past hand tight with the pipe wrench over there. And this gasket just basically fits around the nut like that. It just kind of slides over. And then of course if you have to take this thing back off again, it just comes right back off. And then you can access your nut. Especially if you put this thing on and it starts to leak, you can take this stuff back off and tighten it up a little bit more. But anyway, just in a few minutes we'll get the water supply hooked up over there and flush this toilet for the first time since the rebuild. Okay, the tank is almost ready to go back onto the bowl. And I wanted to make a little bit of an improvement into how it was mounted previously. Since I have an extra set of washers and everything with a new kit, I went ahead and used the old nuts and washers to go ahead and kind of double nut it. So this first set of nuts is basically to tighten down these gaskets at a much more precise and specific torque to prevent leaks. And then the second set of nuts and washers are going to be used to fasten the tank to the bowl and compress this gasket. That way the two different fasteners handle the functions independently. That way this tank can rock a little bit if need be, and you're not going to have to worry about leaks at these points here. So I can apply a certain amount of torque to these fasteners for the right amount of sealing pressure here, And then I can also apply a different torque value to these fasteners to achieve a certain seal value with this seal. So that way I'm not trying to use one nut to do everything. So I'm going to go ahead and try to put this tank back on, and we'll see what happens. Okay, everything is in. The tank is all put down and tightened down. Just for the perfect shitting experience, got the tank completely level, both in this dimension and in the other dimension. We can't have our reading material in danger of sliding off onto the floor. So now, and I think I should have mentioned in the beginning of the video, of course, obviously you want to turn off your water supply before you disconnect it up there. Sorry about the lighting, but that's what that little coupling looks like. So now it's time to go ahead and turn on the water and see how high the water gets. There's a water line marking here in the tank right there. So we'll turn this on and see what kind of adjustments we need to make, and also check for leaks. And now that those screws down at the bottom hole in the tank of the bowl are completely submerged in water right now, I'm going to go ahead and check under here. Just basically feel with my hands any kind of leak starting. That way I can shut the water off before the tank gets too full. And so far we're totally dry. Filling up quite nicely. That's almost dead on the money there. Almost that water line. I might want to raise that water line a little bit higher, but let's see how it flushes. It's a pretty powerful flush. A little bit higher that time. Check out the bowl, see what it's looking like. It's looking pretty good as far as the water height goes. I think I might want to tweak that adjustment just a little bit more to get the water high enough, but quite honestly this thing is flushing pretty powerfully. So there you have it, guys, in a nutshell, how to pretty much rebuild your entire toilet assembly. The flapper valve and the handle, that's nice and tight now. And now I got a really nice powerful flush. I don't think I have any leaks going on under here. I feel with my hand, they're pretty dry. And I was able to maintain or keep my hard water line there, which is nice. Didn't have to go to the expense of buying the flexible kinds. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's always good to have a nice powerful flush for those special occasions, particularly after Thanksgiving when you have a lot of work to do in here, up to and including even an explosion. You've got the nice 5-gallon tank ready and available for you, and all the adjustments are such that you get a complete dump of the water in there as fast as possible. So hopefully this will save you guys some money from calling the plumber to fix your own toilet issues.